Are we on then? Good evening, everybody. Hello, this is Ritu Sharma from Kindle Your True Power, and we are here today with a very special guest of ours called Saila, and she's all the way from America, therefore a change in timing today. Myself, Ritu Sharma, I'm a women's transformation coach. I work for empowerment for women and transforming lives, where I push them further to achieve their full potential, howsoever possible. I work alongside my colleague, Sam Ritu, who's a business mentor and coach, and he is also a burnout specialist, and he does some amazing work dealing with people, helping them out at their career end and personal life end as well. The lady we have here, Saila, is too huge a personality for words, I would say, and we're really honoured and we're humbled to have her tonight here with us on Kindle Your True Power. The aim, this dream we have that we will share with everybody through Kindle Your True Power is to bring together people who have had lives which are amazing, had their own share of difficulties and challenges, and they have managed to come out the other end, creating success stories for themselves. And Saila is definitely one of them. Let's welcome Saila. Hello, Saila. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I admire your mission of your show, by the way.
Thank you very much, Saila. We're really, really pleased to have you here. And I've not mentioned that Saila is a filmmaker. She's a film producer and a film director. And her most recent film, The Valley, has it come out already, Saila, or is it on its way?
We had a premiere in London, and we've screened it in Birmingham and Leicester. And but it will have a much more extensive rollout starting on this weekend. So it's going to be in Birmingham again in the future. You can check www.thevalleyfilm.com for theater screenings.
Superb. And just before we talk about Saila being a film producer, film director, and the rest of it, I would really like Saila to talk about her own journey from the start. And I know she was not a filmmaker in the start of her career. Saila, you want to tell us about the journey you've had so far?
So I started off, I always loved film, and it's what I wanted to do as a young person, but it's you know, the Asian diaspora, it's not considered, it's very risky, right? And it really truly is risky. So so my parents kind of pushed me towards a safer career, and I went into engineering, and I studied electrical engineering, and I mean, there are aspects of it I liked, but my heart was always with film. And so, but anyway, I went along and I had a career. I studied all the way to a doctoral degree, and I worked in IBM. I worked in research. I worked as a development manager. And as I got older, I had children. I raised my children, my two girls. One is in college and one is in high school. And but you know, that dream was always in me. You know, I always wanted to still continue to do that. And so I went back to college. I got a degree in filmmaking. I felt like I need some expertise and some, you know, I mean, I'm a great aficionado. I've watched so many movies, but so I got training. I made some short films, and then this is my feature debut. So
wow,
kind of the journey.
And I think because you've had so much to do in the past, you've skipped a big chunk of what you did, because when I read your profile, it also said that you've owned a business in the past as well.
Yes.
Building business, and wow, that's completely off track from what you did and what you're doing now. How did that come about?
So that came about, I mean, it's also an interest of mine. I remodeled, I did a whole house remodel of my home, and I discovered I really like that. So I basically started, as I was raising my children, one of the things you find in corporate America is they own your entire time. I mean, you know, time is so precious in America, especially where I live, where if you started working, I mean, I worked as an engineer here, and you basically don't have time to spend with your children. So I wanted to see, can I create a career which is flexible, or business which is flexible, so I could pick my kids up from school. I could, you know, help them with their homework. I could do the things I wanted to do with them and still run the business. And so this is how the whole building business came about. And so I did 5 houses, which is, I basically bought a lot, tore down the house, and then built a new house and sold it. And then each one takes about 2 years, sort of like making creating a film. It takes a long time. And it was profitable. I always made money, and so that's how I kind of, when I was going through the process of raising my children, that's what I did.
I know exactly what you're saying. It's amazing what you've done, and of course, I agree with the fact that time becomes so precious, especially when you're raising kids. Because I'm a mom, I've got 2 daughters. Sam has 3 daughters. We're all involved in this thing, and we do feel that time runs out really fast, and children grow up really quickly, and you do need to spend time with them, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So, how your film, The Valley Saila, what is it based around? What is the theme of the film?
So the story, the short synopsis is, it's about an Indian American entrepreneur who lives in Silicon Valley. And for external purposes, his life looks perfect. I mean, he's made it. He's sold a couple of startups. He's affluent. And he thinks, he's got 2 beautiful daughters. His wife is beautiful. And his daughter goes away, his younger daughter goes away to college, and she commits suicide shortly after.
Okay.
And he's kind of blindsided, and he wants to find out what happened. And so he goes back and starts talking to her friends and starts, trying to probe with his family. And so it's about kind of that journey. And it's really a commentary on our modern life. I mean, what I found is our priorities are, we kind of, careers, everything, fame, career, money are so prized nowadays. And the family is something that's taken a back seat. I mean, to the extent of, especially in Silicon Valley, if a woman is not pursuing that career, she's kind of looked down upon, and that's touched in the movie as well. But, she doesn't have this high flying career, she's taking care of her children, and that's considered, or a man for that matter, if a man is doing that. And so.
You're not talking about your own personal life and your own personal journey, Saila, from being an Asian American, from growing up into an Indian family and sticking to what we call the mold and doing the safe thing, which our parents obviously expect from us, and then breaking from that mold and going to do something that was your own dream and you loved the essence of it. What would you say about this thing about creating a safe life rather than a happy life? And because you're a perfect example, and that's what I put in my Facebook post, saying this is an ideal example for all of us, especially women, because Saila's done it. So yes, it must have been difficult. I'm 100% sure it must not have been easy on you, but you've achieved it. You've done what was your dream in the first. You've achieved it. So I want you to elaborate a bit more on that. What was your journey from being who you were expected to being who you actually are?
I think it's a very tough journey, and it continues. I think it continues your whole life. I think as Asian women, we almost have untenable expectations placed on us.
Yes.
I mean, we are supposed to be this, perfect mother, perfect wife, perfect house. Everything is, you have to cook these elaborate meals. I mean, it's like,
we're to be perfect cooks. Even if we hate cooking to bits, we're still expected to be the perfect cooks.
I mean, I think if an American woman comes home and makes spaghetti, she's considered a heroine, An Indian woman, that's considered, what's wrong with you? You came home and made spaghetti, Where's the 5-course meal? Like, I think it's that whole expectation of not just that, but we're supposed to be selfless and kind and generous and unselfish. And, there's just expectation upon expectation. And I think it's very hard for us to meet all those expectations.
I agree. I completely agree.
And add to that a dimension that nowadays you're expected to be intellectually bright. Like you have to have great school grades, perfect grades, and you're supposed to have a job and a career and a paycheck. So in addition to all these home expectations, there's the whole work expectations.
Yes. Yes.
So I feel like you need to find out what makes you. I think you have to get yourself away from the noise in a quiet place and figure out what makes you happy and what makes you fulfilled. And you know, there's a great book. It's called Find Your Strongest Life.
Okay.
And I read that book and I was really taken with it because, you know, what he says is the thing that you are meant to do is what the thing that makes you feel energized.
Okay.
Like, for example, like an accountant, when they balance their books perfectly, they feel like overjoyed, you know.
Yeah.
This is what, you know, gives them a real thrill. Like, and where someone else who hates accounting, for them it's like completely draining when they do accounting, you know.
I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what. So do you think when you know the women thing? I want to highlight it. I want to highlight it to all my audiences, men and women equally, that they need to hear Saila out and what was she saying about Asian women, what they are expected to be, is almost unrealistic, and we are expected to be right down on our own priority list,
You're
right?
laughing. Yes.
Yeah, and you're not allowed a lot of times to be yourself, and as you said, to make yourself happy. So I really want to highlight this, Sila, while you're talking about it's just what we would want to talk about. And because Sam and I both work in personal development side of things, that's what we hammer into people's minds when we're talking to them. Do what makes you happy rather than please everybody else outside. Happiness is an inside job. Focus on your own true power, on your own true self. What is right for you? Open yourself to that. So it's amazing that you've said it. Perfect. Bang on. Thank you very much for saying that.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
brilliant.
No, but
You're
there's also this aspect that if you are happy, you can spread that to other people.
agreed.
I
Completely
mean, you
agreed.
can make your family happy. Whereas if you're disgruntled and you're frustrated, I think it reflects on your family.
I
And
completely agree.
it's sort of like when you're in an airplane, they tell you put the oxygen mask first and then put the
Yes.
oxygen mask on your child.
Yes.
So you need to feed yourself and be fulfilled and then spread that to your children and to your family, you know?
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's lovely. Right.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
one thing. One thing which I want to add over here is, Saila, is how many people do understand that they are number one in their life. They always put other people first. We do not acknowledge ourselves. We just wanted to make sure that other people are happy, whether it's a husband, as a wife, his children, is my mother or father or auntie or uncle. But you never come first. You always think, no, 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 let everybody else happy. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. I
Mm-hmm.
can solve everybody else's problem. My problem doesn't matter anymore. So that's the as you said, the key is to be happy within. And that was my journey in 2006. I started to be more happier for myself than for even for my children and for my ex-wife, because I thought if I'm going to be stronger within myself, I will be able to help others, especially my nearest and dearest people. Otherwise, as you said, you have a very fake grunt on your face, or you have a very fake smile on your face, and just trying to pretend everything is hunky dory, but underneath you are actually shattered in thousand pieces.
Sila
So
touches
being
upon that. Sila's just been talking about the Valley touches upon it, doesn't it, Sila? Talking about how beautiful the family looks from the outside. And the guy whose daughter commits suicide, he thinks that everything is nice and rosy. But it comes to him in a harsh way. The reality hits him in a harsh way when he finds out. Of course, the daughter must have been very unhappy within herself to have taken that drastic step.
The daughter is suffering from depression, which is a
Mm-hmm.
disease, a mental health disease. And this is one of the things that I really wanted to bring out in the movie is amongst the Asian diaspora, this whole concept of mental health is so stigmatized.
Yes.
Especially depression. I think depression is unique as a mental health issue because it can be hidden. Other things like bipolar or schizophrenia are very
Yeah.
hard to hide. They kind
Yeah.
of show themselves in one way or another. Depression, I think, is more common than we like to admit. And
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to hide. So people don't recognize, even family members don't recognize it, that, oh, this person is suffering from a mental health issue. And you think, oh, they're just, in a bad mood, like, they should buck up and, get themselves out of it. Or,
Yeah.
just grin and bear it, or tough it out, or, these are the kinds of things you hear. Like, why are you like this? You have everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's one of the things that I allude to in the movies, with the whole analogy of The Pearl, which is a book by John Steinbeck, which is this poor couple thinks that, attaining this very large, beautiful pearl will solve all their problems because it's worth a lot of money. So having everything and having a lot of money are two different things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because really the thing that helps with issues like depression are family support and strong family connectivity. And, the idea that your parents love you unconditionally. Even if I fail in academia, or even if I fail my class, my parents are still going to love me.
Yeah.
If they have that kind of confidence, that's worth more than, a BMW.
Yes.
That's the kind of support that helps for people who are suffering with this. And so that's one of the highlights of the movie.
And this is another thing that us Asians, unfortunately, quite a few generations, and unfortunately, even now, people my generation are still practicing it, and I've seen it happen in families where children they have a hierarchy in the family depending upon what their achievements are academically. And I think that's a very wrong practice. Your children are your children. You love them regardless of what they're achieving and how bright academically they are. They're your children, for goodness sake. But you've just mentioned that, Saila, but I want you to elaborate on what do you feel? How much pressure do children feel in terms of, their achievements? And of course, because we have such a social setup in Asian communities that subconsciously we're at a competition, even if we don't realize that. We're competing against the neighbors' children, or people we mix with, our friends, our colleagues, and so on. And the embarrassment floods in, God knows from where. Even though we're not related, the two children don't have the same caliber, they might not even be the same age or same year group. It's almost unrealistic what some parents would expect of their children.
Actually, it's one of the first scenes in the movie. They're at a Christmas party, and someone who's supposed to be a good friend of the family is kind of gossiping behind the back of the family, saying, the older daughter is doing really well. The younger daughter, she only got into a state school, and would you believe that was her first choice?
Oh.
So it's kind of like this. Everyone is pitting their kids against each other. It's almost like part of their achievement spectrum, that what their child is doing reflects on them, and who the child is as a person is kind of lost. And the qualities that some kids exhibit, like Maya in the movie, she's very authentic and she's very kind and gentle. They're not valued, What the qualities that are valued is the go-getter, the one who knows how to play the game, the one who's kind of, shrewd and kind of maneuvers, and these, that's kind of what I wanted to highlight in the movies. Every kid is an individual. I'm not trying to pass a value judgment like, oh, these are good, these are bad, or whatever, but there are qualities in each child that deserve to be appreciated,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think I believe this is a recipe for disaster when you start making direct comparisons between children, siblings as well. Oh, she's better looking, or she's got better hair, or she's got a fairer complexion. Another thing with us Asians. Oh, you're good for nothing. The neighbor's child is same age and she or he's achieved so much more better than you. If she can do it, you can do it. That sort of an attitude. If she can do it, you can do it. I think that kills the actual personality, the actual charisma that every child has.
And it's self-esteem,
Yeah, more than anything else, it's self-esteem. We kind of kill their self-respect. So I think what you touched upon in the Valley is brilliant. And considering it's story of an Asian American and immigrant family, I believe, I really hope and pray that it opens eyes of at least some individuals, if not a lot. When they watch it, they realize the behavioral patterns they're following, and hopefully they'll want to change it, and they'll be able to change and learn something from it.
That's what I hope.
I think what Saila, what you've been portraying in your movie is quite significant. Not within the Western world, within the developing world as well, and how we see our children. Not only the children, even the spouse. How do you see your spouse as well? How you compare your spouse to others? And that creates a bigger conflict within the setting of your unit. And that destroys the self-esteem. Not only the self-esteem of individual, but also the unit itself get destroyed. And the depression, what you talk about earlier, I have a first-hand experience because my mom was suffering with this depression, which was a silent depression. And it was quite a sad story what has happened to my mom in that context as well. We find out after what she did was quite a significant dilemma for all of us in our family. So what we are portraying in this movie is quite an eye-opener, and I will highly recommend people to go and watch this movie. Just start seeing the trailer at the moment, which we have already put it on our segment this time. Well, thank you for sharing what you are sharing right now.
Thank you. I feel depression is far more widespread amongst the Asian diaspora than we are aware. I think as whoever is listening to this will be able to relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
Either they know someone who has depression or they themselves are depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen, like with Americans, they're far more likely to go seek professional help. Indians are not. They think it's something to be ashamed of. And, you know, if you look at the MRI of a brain of a normal person without depression and look at the MRI of a brain of a person with depression, they actually look different. Mm-hmm. It's a physiological phenomenon. It's not something you made up. It's something that happens to people. I liken it to diabetes. You have a genetic propensity. Like you're born, like if your parents both have diabetes, most likely you will get it.
Yeah.
And then you have also your behavior that either contributes or makes it, you know, better, which is like whether you exercise or how you eat and so on. I think it's a lot like that. Depression, there is a genetic propensity. And then things which happen in your life, which you can control or can't control, they contribute to the problem or make it better. So it's not something where you should blame the person. Like, why are they like this, you know? Mm-hmm. It's possible they genetically inherited the propensity and something happened in their life or, you know, that they couldn't control. And it kind of caused it to flare. So,
and you know, what you just said, Saila, about not seeking professional help. I think that's the second step towards the solution. The first step is acknowledging that the problem exists, that the depression is a part of somebody's life. And I talk from personal experience. In my younger years, depression did hit me as well. And because we came from a very conservative family, we were not allowed to talk about stuff like this. And the telling off was generic, like you said, toughen up, what's your problem? You've got everything around you. You go to the best uni, the best college, you're given everything that you require. What's your issue? But the issue was not materialistic. The issue was psychological. So the first step, I think, is to acknowledge that the problem exists. And it's not visible. And I was a person who was very good at hiding. I have a nice broad smile and nobody could say, I sounded and looked really confident, really happy. And there was nobody telling me that something could be wrong with this girl. But deep down, it was really, it was a turmoil, really. However, as you say, yes, we do need to open up towards seeking help. But the first thing is to the families to understand and acknowledge that the problem could hit anyone. It could come at any age. It could come in any form, size, and shape. And we need to be open to this understanding that depression can be a part and parcel of somebody's life.
And the thing, I think there is a lot of benefit of seeking professional help, because it's sort of similar to diabetes. You go see a doctor. There's nothing wrong with seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist. You're seeking help for your problem. And, one of the other things I wanted to point out, I was very careful. I didn't want my movie to be a trigger. Because sometimes, there has been a very popular series here, about suicide. And it actually came, I never heard of it, but it came almost at the same time as my movie. And, but psychologists were up in arms about this. In fact, every educator, like our school, sent out a letter to all the parents saying, don't let your child watch this alone. Because it actually was instructional. It actually taught somebody how to go about committing suicide. I mean, they basically made it for entertainment and sensationalistic purposes, And so, it calls to like crisis centers went up 30%. I mean, it was just not good. So I absolutely, although I never heard of this news, I absolutely did not want that for the movie. So I was very careful in certain things. Like I never show how she dies, for example. And the focus of the movie is really the devastation on the family and the friends. And that is a deterrent, because one of the things psychologists use when they're dealing with somebody like this is they say, okay, if you do this, look what's going to happen to your family. Think about your family. You're gonna damage them irreparably for the rest of their lives, and that's what the movie shows. So the point I was trying to make is, how do you deal with someone who is suffering from this? Okay, the first thing to do is to try to notice the symptoms. And in the movie, I kind of strewed this throughout the movie in subtle ways. Symptoms like you can't sleep, your eating patterns change. Like either the person stops eating, eats very little, or eats way too much, or something. Their eating patterns change. They're socially very awkward. They try to be alone all the time. These are all symptoms of depression. So one of the things to do if you suspect someone has depression, is to talk to them. Like contrary to what, there's a misconception. If I talk about something, it's going to, give them ideas. That's not true. They already have the ideas. If someone is suicidal, they've thought about it for a long time. It's not something that just cropped up and they did it. They've been thinking about it for quite a while. They just haven't told anyone. So talking to them, saying, okay, are you thinking about suicide? What are you thinking about doing? Do you have the means? Do you have a plan? Because these sorts of questions tell you how urgent the problem is. If the person has a plan and they have the means, that means that they're pretty close to trying or committing the act. So then it becomes much more immediate what you need to do. That you need to get them professional help. You need to call a crisis line. There are a lot of nonprofits that deal in this space. So find something and get some help, because it's a catastrophe no one wants in their life.
No, definitely not. And I'm really impressed that you've taken a responsible stance, Saila, and you said, I'm not trying to trigger something here, and that you made very sure that whatever you were portraying, whatever you were saying in the film, or doing in the film, showing in the film, did not encourage anyone to take that step. But it was contrary to that. You wanted them to think, this is what happens to your family if you take a step like that. And I'm sure even when a person is under severe depression, if they drift from that thought of, I'm not going to live anymore because I don't want to what would happen to my family? What would happen to my parents? They love me. If I just went and left so many questions unanswered for them, how are they going to deal with it? How are they going to live with those questions for the rest of their lives? So hats off to you. I think it's really, really, it's brilliant. It's beautiful how you've taken a very responsible stance, because looking around, Saila, these days, the sort of films that are coming up, I think filmmakers do need to take a responsible approach, considering that youngsters are influenced in a massive way. when they put something out, a new idea, a new notion, a new anything, even the way people dress themselves up, it does affect them in a big manner. So it's beautiful that you have taken that into consideration.
Thank you. No, I agree with you totally. There are certain things like gratuitous violence, it's just so prevalent now.
Yeah.
And we wonder why are there so many school shootings and all these other things. I mean, you don't have this issue in England because thankfully you have responsible gun laws. But
we don't have guns, but we do have the rate of stabbing in schools has shot up significantly recently, Saila, and it is a big thing that the government is concerned about. Yes, we don't have guns, but children they do get knives and whatever sharp objects they can, and stabbing has become a major problem.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so which is again a reflection on that violence is so acceptable these days in any of the TV programs, any of the films they watch, that even parents don't flinch in it anymore, because they think, oh, it's shown everywhere, it's everywhere. You stop your child watching one sort of program, they'll switch on to another, and then they discuss stuff about that, and they take pleasure into talking about the fights and whatever it is, and things go wrong massively from there on.
No, I think there's the constant exposure is definitely a problem.
Yeah.
And the media is directly responsible for that because they think it sells, so they put it in there to create commercial value. It's just irresponsible,
It is very responsible. Saila, you talk about immigrant parents. Do you feel even now the immigrant parents face more difficulties or different type of problems as compared to native Americans or native British people? Because you touch upon that aspect in your film as well.
That's a great question. I feel personally that immigrant parents put more pressure on their children because they themselves are more successful. They've come from a harder place. They've left all their ties. They've moved to a foreign country. And they've made successes of their lives. And so they have higher expectations of their children. Than I particularly see this in America. I don't know about, I'm sure the same thing holds for UK. That one of the things when I first wrote this story, I was trying to find a producer, and I went to several producers, and they told me, you should just make them mainstream Americans. Don't make them immigrants.
Okay.
And really, that's one thing that's unique about the Valley is that it's not about them being immigrants. They are immigrants, but it's really about the culture they're in and the pressures that they are facing and mental health. But it's not about them being immigrants. It's just that these things are accentuated because they're immigrants. So most immigrant movies or movies which have a lot of ethnic characters is really about them being immigrants. It's about them being Islamic, or it's about them being, and facing Islamophobia, or it's about them. But this is not, it's about them trying to be successful and the pressures they face and the depression and anxiety that's created as a result. The fact that they're immigrants, I think, accentuates it. And so I kept them as immigrants because, first of all, it's a story I understand. And I think it is true that they feel more pressure.
And I think the firstborn generation in foreign land, the parents who've moved who are immigrants themselves, they carry the same values from back home. And though they're in a new land, a new place, a new culture, they want to hold on to the values they've brought with themselves. And they find it difficult to expand their own boundaries, to merge into the culture. They do want to become successful, and most of them do because they are hardworking, in all honesty. So they do taste success. However, that pressure of the values they've brought from back home, and the children being a part of this culture rather than the culture from back home, there's a big drift as well. I think that's another aspect that troubles our young children, because they're being brought up here, but the values parents are trying to instill are from back home.
Right.
There's a bit of a tug of war between their own psyche, thinking, do I belong here or do I belong with my parents? where am I merging in? Am I developing in here? Am I pleasing my parents? I'm doing good enough to please the community, and so on.
And I think an additional aspect is that for American culture, they actually do have respect the individuality of the child.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst the Asian immigrants particularly, I think conformity is very important. Conforming to what your expectations is much more important. And perception, how you appear, what people think.
Yeah.
Americans are a little bit like, I've had American friends who've told me, like, I don't know them that well, but they've told me about the issues their children are facing. Oh, my child is, really seems to be having a hard time with this, struggling with physics, failing this, whatever. You can know I have Indian friends I've known for 20 years who would never tell me that. That there seems to be more of the hiding of problems and keeping up an appearance, which causes even more pressure, I think, for the child. Because the child is given the message that it's not okay to talk about your problems. It's not okay to have problems, in fact.
Yeah. Exactly. And it hits you when you're an adult then, and you've grown up in a family like that. It hits you really hard when you realize that, it was normal all the way along. There was nothing out of the way that was happening to me, or I was feeling, it was nothing different. It's a part and parcel of life. And once you accept that, Sal, I think life becomes easier from there on. Once you embrace the problems you have, your challenges, and you're ready to accept them and grow into who you are rather than who you want to be seen as, I think your journey becomes a tiny bit easier then.
Yes.
Because you're ready to deal with your actual issues from there on.
Yes.
I think there is another element of integration. Integration in the society, integration within the culture. There is a bigger impact on people who come from abroad. I've seen several families who try to integrate within the society, they couldn't get integrated. First of all, they want to stick to their own people, and just wanted to keep the same things going on, and later on find out that their children are suffering with a lot of anxieties, a lot of other issues within themselves, and they can't comprehend those things. That's quite a significant area where our generation, or my generation, or my parents' generation, were not looking at that closely. But my generation, I look at this very closely with my children, making sure that their emotional state are completely to the point where I can understand them and I can listen to them. And now parents are coming from abroad. Their first priority is to work hard, but they're not giving enough time to their children. I've seen so many parents, their children have grown behind the scene, then realizing their children are 16 years old, and they are just thinking where the time has gone. They don't know their own children.
And the children don't want to know from there on. The children are not interested in parents then. And I think that's where the family unit fails as well. All these issues we have with children not looking after their elderly parents, not being bothered about their well-being. And I think that's because children have felt it along the way somewhere themselves, that they were not needed, or they were not looked after, they were not loved enough. And therefore they're not bothered. In the olden times, the family unit was intact, and it stayed intact, no matter how old the parents were, how dependent they became eventually in the old age. But that sort of a thing it's depleting now. You hardly see that sort of a thing now. And I think what Sam's just said, that's also a major part of the problem with integration. Our people build up barriers, and they don't want to mingle with other communities. And so they bring their children up saying, this is who we are, and this is who we stay. And of course, children being children, they want to explore, and they want to experience life, and they want to know everything and find out what's happening where. They become a bit imbalanced in that way as well. What do you think about that, Saila?
I think there is that element, but there's also the element of the society doesn't want the children either, unless they are a certain way, right? So there is also, I mean, there's the aspect that the community doesn't want to integrate into the society, but there's also the aspect of how much the society accepts the community. I find in America, you know, I grew up in, when I was young, I lived in several countries. I lived in India, I lived in Canada, and I lived in America. And when I was growing up in Canada, there was a lot of overt prejudice. Like, people call you Paki in the street. I mean, it's sort of like England, I think, used to have this issue as well.
Yes.
And I was very, I was actually, it's not that I didn't want to integrate. I feel like they didn't want me, you know?
Okay.
And when I came to America, I thought the attitude is so different. It really is. I mean, people are very accepting, and contrary, I don't know how the media depicts, but people are very accepting and open, and they really didn't, they were very curious, and they didn't really mind that I was from a different ethnicity or whatever, and very accepting. So I thought, wow, this is it, you know, this is really the melting pot, you know. But in the recent past, I've actually started to question, like, am I living in a fool's paradise here, you know? Because I've always lived on two coasts. I've lived in New York and I've lived in California, which are I think there's a whole area in between of America, which is exactly what I experienced growing up in Canada, which is not accepting and not, you know.
I think a part of it still exists, unfortunately, Sala. It's not a thing of the past still. This non-acceptance is still there. It's not that everyone is ready to accept each other even now. But I think it's both ways, rather than saying that the society doesn't accept you. We're not ready to accept the society as a whole as well sometimes. I have seen a lot of Asians who are happy being closed and they want to stay like that. I don't know whether it's the fear of unknown, whether they're not sure what would happen if they did open up. So they feel it's safer to just stick to each other rather than open themselves to the outer world. And that racism and that discrimination, it still exists.
Mm-hmm. I think you make an excellent point, because, I mean, I've had a chance to spend some time in the UK, and I found people extremely friendly and accepting, and, you know, and I didn't get the sense. I mean, I'm talking, you know, 30 years, 40 years ago. The world has evolved a lot. The level of global awareness has gone up, partly due to the internet, partly the media. And I feel like the UK, I felt, was very accepting. Society was accepting. So maybe it's more of one issue than the other, you know?
Yeah.
More of an issue of...
It's a huge issue in itself, isn't it? Yeah. This whole race thing and this whole culture thing, it's a huge thing in itself to talk about. Sam, do you want to ask anything?
I just wanted to... The journey which you had, being an electrical engineer, being a PhD, going into film, is quite a journey. Because as a mom, as an Asian American, being an electrical engineer, how did you manage to work within the domain?
Oh, that's a whole different topic. It's interesting because all three of the things I've done are male dominated.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was an engineer, and it's a completely male dominated, electrical engineering. Then I was in the building business, which is male dominated. And as a director of a movie, there are very few female directors.
Yeah.
Very few.
Correct.
I mean, I don't think it was intentional. I think it just so happened that my interests were in those fields. And I don't know, I never viewed being a woman as a limitation. And I think that's part of what we need to ingrain in our daughters, you know, that you shouldn't limit your dreams simply because of your gender, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it does make it harder. I don't have illusions. It's sort of like what we just discussed with the ethnic factor, right?
Yeah.
You have your own internal, you know, views, and there's society at large, which is, you know, ingraining certain views inside of you, right? I mean, there's so many studies on this, so much research. I mean, for example, just a simple classroom. If you know, if there are 10 kids, 5 girls, 5 boys, and all 10 put up their hand, the boys are, you know, 80% more likely to be called on by the teacher. So, you know, starting from a young age, I think we silence women.
Yes.
And in very subtle ways, we silence them. And I think this is something we have to find our own voice, and we have to have that strength, you know. And I mean, I hate to say this, it's not just men, it's other women.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's not just, in fact, a lot of times I found other men to be more supportive than other women. I hate to say it, but it's true.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. It is unfortunate that women, being women, they would not want other women to succeed. And there's a lot of envy, there's a lot of jealous feelings, and the rest of it. And I think the first responsibility, I think, Saila, lies on the shoulders of the mother of any girl, every girl, and then the teachers, because that's the first port of contact for children. And I think it lies with every single mom and every single teacher, not just girls, boys, anyone, any child comes into contact with, that they've got to instill that self-love, that self-acceptance, that self-worth, and self-respect in every single child, and they should be able to see themselves in their own true light, rather than, you know, be disillusioned or illusioned by their surroundings. So I think that's an excellent point that you've made. That's brilliant.
And we should support each other. I think, you know, the more women support other women, the more chance we have to break out of, you know, our gender limitations that would have been imposed on us, you know?
Definitely. Definitely. Amazing.
Absolutely. I think more and more fathers are becoming what I call it, looking after their children, and mothers are going to work because they are working in a corporate environment. And fathers are taking that responsibility to be at home, looking after the children, and they do not mind about those things. And I think it's about accepting. But within our culture is always been thrown upon that the mother or the father is the breadwinner. When mother become the breadwinner, it becomes the biggest issue within the community. And how could it that possible?
Yeah. It's about power. A lot of things about power. And I think in societies where women are not allowed power, there are a lot of negative ramifications. And when women share in the power structure, it actually works for a better system.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
But, you know, one of the things I feel, and you brought up a really good point, is the fathers are so critical in this. Like, I'm very lucky. I married a wonderful person. And he came from a family, like his sister is a doctor and his mother was a headmistress. And so he never really has any chauvinistic views about our daughters. Like, he never said, oh, you can't do this because you're a girl, or he never even implied that or gave them that impression. So I think it's so key how the father behaves with the girls.
Yes, definitely.
You know, what the attitudes of the father are.
The good thing
I
is
say
changing gradually. A lot of men are taking on the responsibility now. They are accepting of the women that, yes, she can be more powerful than I am, or she can be in a more, you know, higher paid job than I am. And that's not a problem. And father become the first role model for a girl. And I think it's it's urgently needed that fathers do take on that responsibility, and they do become the correct sort of man, respecting their wife first, and then also attending to their daughter's needs in a very responsible manner.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm a proud father of 3 girls, and I can assure you that what I see in my girls is looking at them as I can't see that. I can see both the genders in them. I said they are my daughters and they are my sons. So it does make a difference to me because I'm so proud that they are doing and excelling in their education and looking at the future. What I'm proud of. So I'm very humble about that.
Excellent. That's super. And Saila, we're so honored that you could make time to come and be with us today. And I'm really proud that you're doing such an amazing job. And it's just, the time's just gone by. It did not feel like almost an hour we've been talking about these things. And I think that was just about the right sort of things we wanted to hear. We wanted to know, we wanted you to share with our listeners, our viewers. And I can't really thank you enough for coming along and sharing your journey with us and all the beautiful things you've said. And they're just spot on. Each one of them is exactly how it should be. And I just want to say a huge thank you for being you and for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. And I want to tell your viewers and your listeners to look for The Valley. It's releasing in India and the UK, and later on in the US in June. So in India, it should be the first week of April. And the UK, it'll be again the first week of April and throughout April in various locations. And in the US, it'll be in 14 cities starting June.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you again from myself and from Ritu for being our guest today. It was our honor to have you on our segment, Kindle Your True Power, and you sharing your journey with the Valley. And it's quite intriguing that you shared a lot of key points. And if you are listening to this interview later on with Saila, and if you have affected by any of the things, I'm going to be putting some numbers where you can have confidential talk about suicide or depression or anything else, because we would like you to take professional help. Is not a stigma anymore. Mental health is the issue. I've gone through with my mother, and I can say if I would have known before, we would have prevented what she has done. So please go and take professional help as soon as possible. And if you know somebody who's going through it, please recommend them to go and see the doctor and get professional help. Thank you once again to our guest speaker today, Saila from United States of America, sharing her journey, sharing her story with us, her amazing production of her movie, which is going to be screening in April in London and in India and in America shortly as well. So I will say thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye-bye.